Hi, my name is Connie Klinkam, and I will be presenting a project on substance abuse disorder and intimate partner violence. Before we get too far in this, let's talk about the difference or the sameness of intimate partner violence, or IPV, and domestic violence, or DV. So, domestic violence is the old term. Generally, it's reserved for marriages between a male and a female. Not always. Intimate partner violence is a more modern term and is all-encompassing of all types of intimate partnerships. I have a tendency to use both of these interchangeably, so just know that IPV and DV are about the same thing. The prevalence and impact of IPV cannot be discounted. It is estimated that 25% of American women will experience domestic violence or sexual assault at the hands of an intimate partner in their lifetime. This is most likely a conservative estimate, since both domestic violence and sexual assault are both significantly underreported. Survivors of IPV have a substance abuse rate of 5 times that of the normal population. There are several reasons for this, and we'll discuss them later in the presentation. But standalone, these two facts illustrate the social impact of substance abuse disorder among survivors of intimate partner violence. It's significant. The history of trauma and substance abuse. So the connection between trauma and substance abuse is well documented. Substance abuse is often a coping mechanism for survivors of trauma. Many survivors of IPV have experienced trauma as a child, and they may have started using substances as a coping mechanism to deal with that trauma before they even got into an IPV relationship. The IPV just adds to their trauma. In addition, if the substance abuse is not due to the trauma, it can be because of the mental health concerns that the trauma has caused, like PTSD and depression. When talking about domestic violence, one of the most common questions is, why didn't you leave? The answer to that question is complex and is further complicated when substance abuse disorder is involved. The substance abuse can increase the victimization of the survivor by hindering their ability to fight back, or even hindering their ability to make good decisions. In addition, the drug is often a part of the relationship. The abuser may be the survivor's supplier, or the use is an activity that they share in common, and it is when they are high that they feel the most close to each other. If the abuser is not the supplier, it is most likely that they know their supplier, so when the survivor needs to reach out and get drugs after they've left, they risk letting their abuser know where they are. It is a big ask to assume that an IPV survivor is ready to leave and ready to address their substance abuse. Many agencies that would offer help require abstinence, and not all survivors are ready for that step. Remember, the substance abuse has been a coping mechanism in many cases long before the IPV relationship. So leaving an abusive relationship with a substance abuse disorder is more complicated for many reasons. After a survivor does leave an abusive relationship, there are other concerns. Many organizations are only funded to treat the domestic abuse and not the substance abuse, and therefore the treatment is single focused and they don't get what they need. As discussed in the previous slide, the abuser may know the survivor's supplier, so they may be forced into abstinence for safety reasons. If the substance use is stopped before the individual is ready, the person is left without any coping mechanisms. Therefore, they hadn't had the time to develop healthy coping mechanisms before they were taken off of the substance. In addition, substance abuse disorder and survivors of IPV have a greater complication. People with substance use disorder are simply more likely to have a felony conviction or arrest. A survivor with substance abuse disorder and a felony conviction is faced with an even greater challenge if they leave an abusive relationship. A felony record has long-lasting consequences long after the time has been served. A felony conviction can prevent an individual from receiving or keeping low-income housing, and it can also affect the custody decision of minor children. In addition, felons are especially challenged when getting a job. Few employers are willing to bet on a felon. So imagine, if you will, a young mother in an abusive relationship with a no felony on her record with substance abuse disorder. What is she to do? She can't get a job, she can't get housing, and she's at great risk of losing her kids. So the question of why didn't she leave is very complex, but understandable. When discussing treatment of an IPV survivor with substance use disorder, the most important thing is that the treatment is trauma-informed. The moral of this story is that any treatment for a survivor with IPV with substance use disorder is that it must be trauma-informed. The treatment must consider the trauma the individual has experienced and the coping mechanism that the substance use and abuse may be for them. We will discuss 3 treatment methods that are born through research that are trauma-informed: SEEDS, TREM, and WIT. SEEDS stands for Support, Education, Empowerment, and Directions. This is mostly seen in sober living houses. And in these houses, they develop a very strong connection with community, with very like-minded individuals, people that have been there, done that, that are leaving an IPV situation and also have substance abuse. They use it by modeling healthy coping skills, and they empower them to learn job skills so that they can move on with their lives. Another treatment method is TREM. TREM stands for Trauma Recovery Empowerment Model. The 4 tenets of TREM are based on the assumptions that some current dysfunctional behaviors and or symptoms may have originated as legitimate coping responses to trauma. Also, that women who have experienced repeated trauma in childhood are deprived of the opportunity to develop certain skills necessary for adult coping. Traumatic events, especially sexual and physical abuse, sever core connections to one's family, one's community, and ultimately to oneself. And also that women who've been abused repeatedly feel powerless and unable to advocate for themselves. So because of these 4 tenets, they focus on the development of trauma recovery skills like self-awareness and self-protection, as well as self-soothing and emotional modulation. And they shift the focus from one concern, for example, substance use disorder, or from recovering from IPV. And they take a more all-encompassing approach, knowing that the substance use disorder was born from trauma and probably could be from childhood trauma. The third treatment method that we're going to discuss is WIT, Women's Integrated Treatment. So what's interesting about this one is it is specific for women, and it talks about gender responsive services. Basically, that a survivor of IPV that is a woman is going to have different requirements than a man recovering from IPV. Also, of anyone that has a substance abuse disorder. So they use the relational cultural theory, and they focus on women's psychological and developmental needs for the treatment. And then they also work in addiction theory, and they're also very trauma informed. So the next question is, where to go from here? What is next? How can we make this better for our victims of intimate partner violence that have substance use disorder? One of the most important things is early intervention. So early trauma followed by intimate partner violence progresses from use as a coping mechanism to abuse. It just makes it worse. So if we can move in earlier, do early intervention for our young people before they move into an IPV situation, we might be able to stop it before it becomes abuse. As well as we should probably take the longitudinal studies that look at the trauma-informed approaches and refine them so that we can give practitioners evidence-based treatment protocols. I thank you for listening to my presentation. This is a list of the references that I noted in the presentation, and thank you.